All right, let's dive right into this explainer. We are setting up a literal heavyweight title fight today between two legendary paths to persuasion. In one corner, we've got Dale Carnegie, the absolute grandfather of relationship building. And in the other, we have Robert Cialdini, the pioneer of behavioral compliance. Now, both of these guys want to teach you exactly how to get people to say yes, but their methods, well, they couldn't be more different. So let me hit you with a challenge right off the bat. When you are gunning for that raise at work, or trying to close a massive sale, or honestly, even just trying to convince a friend to hit the gym with you, how do you actually do it? Are you relying on genuine empathy to build a deep emotional connection over time? Or are you pulling very specific psychological levers to trigger automatic compliance right in the moment? Essentially, are you speaking to the heart, or are you hacking the brain? We're looking at two absolute juggernauts here that attack the exact same goal, getting folks to agree with you, but from completely opposite angles. Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People dropped way back in 1937, and it is still a global phenomenon today. Then you've got Cialdini's Influence, which is basically the modern, science-backed Bible for marketers and behavioral economists. It's the ultimate showdown, old-school charm versus modern behavioral science. Now, Carnegie's foundational thesis is definitely a warmer, slower burn approach. Just look at this Henry Ford quote he uses. It perfectly illustrates that influence isn't just a bag of cheap tricks or some quick hack. No, it's a fundamental shift in how you view the world. It literally requires you to step outside of your own ego and look at the situation strictly from the other person's perspective. But then we hit Cialdini, and he provides the absolute antithesis to that. His approach is so much faster, punchier, and highly situational. He focuses entirely on the brain and our mechanical psychological levers. See, Cialdini argues that the crushing, everyday pace of modern life forces us to use mental shortcuts. We just don't have the time to deeply evaluate every single request. So, our brains rely on trigger features that cause us to comply automatically, and, as he says, almost mindlessly. It's honestly a fascinating contrast when you put them side by side. You've got the emotional cultivation of Carnegie directly pitted against the psychological triggering of Cialdini. Carnegie wants you to fundamentally transform yourself into a more likable, empathetic human being. Cialdini, he wants you to understand the invisible behavioral scripts dictating human action so you can structure your requests better. One strategy changes you, while the other changes the situation. Section 1, Carnegie. The empathy approach. This approach is all about planting seeds that are going to eventually grow into deep, mutually beneficial relationships. So the absolute crucial point for Carnegie is that you cannot just sit there talking about what you want. Spoiler alert, nobody cares what you want. If you want to influence someone, you have to figure out what they fundamentally desire and then show them exactly how to get it. He argues this is literally the only way under heaven to get anybody to do anything. To prove this, Carnegie shares this amazing little anecdote about the famous writer Ralph Waldo Emerson. So Emerson and his son are trying to get a calf into a barn. They're pushing, they're pulling, just using brute force and focusing entirely on what they wanted. Obviously, the calf resisted. But then a housemaid walks over, simply puts her finger in the calf's mouth to let it suck, and gently leads it right inside. She viewed the entire situation from the calf's perspective. And that right there is the pure essence of Carnegie's method. I mean, think about it. Have you ever agreed to do a huge favor for someone simply because they always remember your name, they listen deeply to your problems, they smile, and they just make you feel important? That is Carnegie's empathy approach in action. It isn't about manipulation. In fact, he stresses over and over that this only works when it is completely sincere and comes from the heart. It's all about fulfilling the deepest urge in human nature, which is the craving to be appreciated. Section 2, Cialdini, the psychology approach. Okay, so if Carnegie is a warm hug, Cialdini is a precise surgical tool. He actually identified these 7 primary levers of influence by going fully undercover for 3 years. He infiltrated sales organizations, fundraising agencies, advertising firms, just to see what really worked out in the wild. Take the scarcity lever. Have you ever bought something online purely because a little red countdown timer said it was running out of stock? That is scarcity completely bypassing your critical thinking and forcing a rapid choice. The absolute core of Cialdini's world is that every single one of us possesses these hidden trigger features. Let's look at the rule of reciprocity, for example. This rule states that we are socially hardwired to try and repay what another person has provided us. If someone does us a favor or hands us a gift, we feel this overwhelming, almost uncomfortable obligation to do one in return. Now, compare Emerson's calf story to Cialdini's hard data on reciprocity. In one crazy study, researchers approached UK investment bankers on their way to work. They were asking for massive charitable donations. We're talking up to a full day's salary, which meant over $1,000 in some cases. But when the researchers simply handed the bankers a small, inexpensive packet of sweets right before asking for the money, the compliance rate more than doubled. Let that sink in. A tiny piece of candy triggered a massive financial return. So this builds a pretty profound contrast, doesn't it? Carnegie is out here demanding that we spend time understanding deep desires to cultivate a genuine want. Meanwhile, Cialdini shows us that sometimes you literally just need to hand someone a piece of candy to trigger an automatic psychological rule. They are fundamentally playing completely different games. Section 3. Where the Worlds Collide. But what if I told you these two legendary competitors don't actually cancel each other out? Because they don't. In the introduction of his revised book, Cialdini brings up a model developed by his colleague Dr. Gregory Nadert. This model reveals that persuasion actually happens in 3 distinct phases. First, you cultivate a positive relationship. Second, you reduce the person's uncertainty. And third, you motivate them to take action. And here's the kicker. You cannot skip these steps. And this is where we see the ultimate synthesis. Look at phase 1, cultivating a relationship. Cialdini flat out admits that before you can use most of his psychological levers, you need people to view you positively. And how exactly do you do that? By using Carnegie's exact principles. Empathy, smiling, sincere appreciation, and listening. Step 1 of Cialdini's highly scientific model is entirely dependent on Carnegie's relationship-building philosophy. No way around it. But, as we all know, just having a warm relationship isn't always enough to get a yes, right? Once Carnegie's empathy establishes that baseline trust, we move to phase 2. This is where Cialdini's specific levers step into the spotlight. You use social proof to show them that everyone else is doing it, and authority to show that the experts recommend it. This reassures their brain that saying yes to you, their friend, is actually a safe, wise, and highly logical choice. Finally, we reach phase 3. Because even a well-liked friend who has perfectly proven their case with expert data still needs to get you off the couch. This is where you deploy Cialdini's final levers. You bring in consistency, reminding them of things they've committed to in the past, and scarcity, highlighting what they stand to lose if they don't act right this second. That's what creates the urgency required for immediate action. Section 4, the ultimate influence strategy. So what should you really take away from this explainer for your own life, your career, and your daily interactions? It's simple. The most powerful persuaders in the world don't force themselves to choose between the heart and the brain. No, they use Dale Carnegie to build an absolutely unshakable foundation of trust and human connection. And then, when the time is exactly right, they use Robert Cialdini's precise psychological levers as the catalyst for the final decision. You need the warmth of the barn to welcome the calf, for sure, but you still might need that piece of candy to get it moving. I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Next time you try to persuade someone, whether you're pitching a massive project to your boss, or honestly just asking your partner to take out the trash, stop and ask yourself, am I building a relationship right now, or am I pulling a lever? Because understanding exactly which tool to use and when to use it might just be your ultimate secret to success. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you on the next one.